Okay, I think we should get started. We're all here, very punctual. Thank you very much. Not easy to get everybody seated so punctually. I want to before I start presenting myself. Um, I want to pass the microphone and to say the few first words to Lena Klosner. You and I go a long time ago. We started discussing partnerships with IDB, and we really are have walked a lot together. Lena is the Nordic Development Fund Deputy Managing Director, and she's going to address the crowd here and in the room, and also the folks that are following online with a few words, and then I will take the microphone again and introduce the rest of the panelists and ask a few questions. So, Lena, glad to have you.
Super. Thank you very much, Matthias, and wonderful to be here among friends and colleagues and really long-term acquaintances. And I thought it could be nice to set the scene with a couple of points. I mean, from on the basis of climate data, because we will be talking about data as well. I mean, they recently published, actually, there will be an event on this tomorrow, the CPI report on the global landscape of climate finance that will be out very soon. And that has some very interesting findings. And since I come from a financing institution that operates with the concessional finance, it was particularly interesting to see the report's figure on what is the share of concessional financing of total climate finance flows, and it's only 6%. So that puts quite a bit of pressure on us, you know, how we use that 6% globally. And we know that concessional finance, I mean, it has a very strong catalytic potential when it's used properly. And that's where we are also on a mission to really place that concessional financing strategically and try to achieve the catalytic impact through being involved early, using multiple financing instruments, combining them in different ways, and also participating in the highest risk segments of private sector activities, which is where we really need to scale up. Another finding from the report is that adaptation finance is absolutely nowhere near where it should be. So that's a clear deficit. Another interesting report which is out is the convergence report on the state of blended financing. And that too it's quite shocking reading, actually, because if you look at the total number of blended finance transactions, it has dipped, I mean, from previous levels. Very few transactions overall in blended finance, and even less so within adaptation. I mean, it's a handful. I think it's 5 or 6 transactions that have been done this year until end of October. So that's clearly an area, if we want to leverage, catalyze, we need to work more on that. And finally, I mean, yesterday the Mdbs signed a declaration and a statement, you know, putting forward some very key ways of working, principles for action. First of all, I mean, the concrete and urgent action needs to be there. That I think we all share. We need more money. We need to scale up the volume of financing. And very, very important, I think we will be touching upon that also later, is the how we use measurement that goes back to the loop of how we place concessional finance in transactions so that it really maximizes the benefits. The country level collaborations is absolutely key. The NDC Accelerator is a champion on that. It really delivers on the priorities of the countries. I'm glad that the need to increase co-financing was also mentioned in the declaration and statement, because that's really our role also. We don't generate our own projects, we co-finance. And finally, the need to increase private sector investment and private sector collaboration was the final point in that declaration. So I think that leaves us with a very good agenda to sort of place our own interventions within, and sort of a fundament to build on. Thank you. Over to you, Matthias.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you very much. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for fostering this strong relationship throughout the years. The Nordic Development Fund is really a great partner of IDB Group. We have here Helen from IDB Invest, and really not only us, but also with the rest of multilaterals. I mean, you have been a great partner and a leader. So thank you very much. My name is Matthias Vendersky. I'm the manager of outreach and partnerships of the IDB, and it's really my privilege to host you all in this event. We want to talk this time about. You mentioned several things that we're going to touch upon with the distinguished guests that we have here, but we really want to seize the opportunity to highlight also some of the good accomplishments that we have done with the NDC, as we call it, the NDC Pipeline Accelerator Multi-Donor Trust Fund, and I know that there's similar schemes done with the rest of multilateral. So in 2017, we started talking about doing this. We launched this initiative, and I want to talk about two things that this helped us do, because we really thought that the NDC Pipeline Accelerator really helped us with several topics. One of them was promoting electric mobility and green hydrogen in Latin America and the Caribbean. With the resources, we attracted $200 million in concessional funds from the Green Climate Fund, benefiting multiple countries, not 9, in fact, that I'm not going to mention, but that's a substantial stakeholding of the IDB that has 26 members in the region. The most recent things that we've done, we talk a lot about the MDB reform. We talk a lot about leading this agenda in the G20. IDB will be heading the heads of MDB group with where all the MDBs are a big part of, and the NDC Accelerator. What it really helped us is with this agenda of innovative financing, some of the debt for nature structures that you saw in Barbados and in Ecuador happened because of this collaboration. So I'm not, I think my colleagues will talk a little bit more about examples, but let me present them. Helen Meirovich is IDB Invest Director of Climate Change. Thank you, Helen, for being here, although you spend most of your time in this pavilion. But thank you for sitting and sharing with us your insights. Davina Milenge Wela from the African Development Bank. She's the Principal Program Coordinator. Thank you very much. Thank you for your partnership. Orgo Singha Roy from the Asian Development Banks is the Principal Climate Change Specialist. Did I pronounce it right? After third attempt. It's an honor to have you all here. So thank you very much. So let me start with my colleague and close colleague, Helen. And perhaps I ask you a question. We'll try to go to 2 or 3 questions. I hope that we have 45 minutes now, 35. So the more succinct and the more concrete, we'll go further, and with more questions. I don't know if you want that, but in any event, we'll start with the first one. Helen, could you provide us with your insightful overview of the partnership, or one of the main instruments for the partnership, the NDC Pipeline Accelerator and its key functions, and perhaps going into this, you can tell us a little bit of the examples of the things that you have done.
Thank you so much for having us here in the conversation as representing IDB Group. Again, not only IDB Invest, but also the public sector side, what we've been doing in climate change. So yes, I think the accelerator, it's a critical fund for us because it allows us to prepare projects. And if there's something that I've heard in many panels since I've arrived is project preparation. We need projects, we need design, feasibility studies, but not only feasibility studies, data, We need examples that then can unlock all those resources, trillions of dollars that private capital is waiting to invest in bankable projects. And I think that in that sense, the accelerator comes as a breath of fresh air, because it is a way to access resources that allows us to test, to innovate, and to pilot. The example that you mentioned in Barbados, of course, they were able to use technical assistance to do the preparedness, because all this financial innovation that we could do, it needs a lot of studies beforehand. It needs the definition of KPIs, the data, the strategic targets, and all those studies need to happen before we even start thinking about the financial innovation that we want to do. So the Debt for Nature or the Debt for Climate that we are doing now in Barbados jointly with, of course, the IDB, EIB, Green Climate Fund, require a lot of support in terms of feasibility analysis, and having the accelerator is critical. I would say that also other innovations that we have done even in the private sector that we are showcasing, and we're taking it now to small and vulnerable countries, has to do with monetization of emission reductions as a result of the closing a coal thermal power plant in Chile before the established timeline. That project, the way we structure, and we were able to see how many emissions were avoided by closing the coal thermal power plant before the established timeline with the government, was critical, because then we can access and bring to the table a structure of blended finance of the CTF that allowed ENGIE, in this case in Chile, to then finance a wind farm that would complement the closing of the thermal power plant. We couldn't have done that without having the initial seed money to do the study, to convince the company to go into that route. So I think that I would just second what you had said before, Matthias, that having those initial resources that can structure and can present the initial studies is critical for us to then to use blended finance and then mobilize private capital.
Great, Helen. Thank you very much. Davina, is this the same with the African Development Bank NDC Hub? I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about this, and if the features are similar, of the objectives?
Yeah, thanks, Matthias. Indeed, as we were designing the Africa NDC Hub, the facility was already operational. I think that was right after Marrakesh, COP 20 something, 3 maybe. And what we were looking at, we looked at the facility, good idea, but there was a whole lot of information, a lot of players on the ground, that we thought that would start with the platform to understand the landscape. There were so many UN agencies. Remember, NDCs came out of COP21. We were already doing a lot of climate stuff. As Mdbs, we were tracking our climate finance since 2011. And so this whole NDC financing was a different thing. And so we wanted to come together as development agencies on the continent to understand how we define NDCs and what needed to be the financing arrangement, and not so much the financing, the technical assistance that was needed. We come from a geography that there is a lot of innovation, but it's not packaged as a bankable investment. And so the Africa NDC Hub is largely a platform to understand what the need is. And of course, this has been a 5-year journey. We now, as of last year, through our Africa Development Fund, which is like the IDA of the World Bank, the Low Income Fund, for the first time in its 16th replenishment, has a dedicated window for climate action. That was launched last year. 10% of that window is to support technical assistance. for policy support, for project preparatory. Good, you mentioned that, because that is where the challenge is for the geography we are in. That you still, with those good intentions, I mean, you read the reports, 9 out of 10 countries are the highest impacted countries globally are in Africa. You look for projects, you can't find them. And that's the challenge. And so we start with the design level. Before we start saying, oh, we need private sector to do this and the other, there's a whole lot of design work that needs to go into that. So that's where the Africa NDC Hub is at. Thanks.
That's great, Davina. One thing I wanted to mention before passing it to Orgo for him to explain if the Asian Development Bank has a similar structure in place is to tell you that this whole notion of the MDB evolution and working as a system, funds like institutions like yours actually are the ones that make us work in the system, because you come after working with us, you work with the African Development Bank, especially on this, but there's other, we're now working with the African Development Bank in SDRs and SDR allocation, and that is, you make us work as a system because you have talked to us, and sometimes we don't talk to each other, but we talk to you, and through you we know what are we doing actually, and how can we actually improve what we do. So thank you for that. But Orgo, please, do you have anything that is similar in the Asian Development Bank?
Yes, thank you. And so not surprisingly, we do have similar modalities and instruments. So for the past, I think 4 years, we do have a very large scale TA facility called the NDC Advanced Facility, which is supporting more than 15 countries, essentially to translate the NDCs into investments and identify projects. But we recognize that NDCs, at least in our region, Asia Pacific region, are largely mitigation focused actually, and not so much adaptation focused. So for the last couple of years, we have been designing another additional program specifically focusing on adaptation. And the reason being three. One is in adaptation, maybe similar to mitigation, there is a lack of pipeline. That's true. But to further complicate, adaptation projects require certain level of sequencing to ensure that you're not doing the wrong project in the beginning and locking in risk. So there's a bit of complications there. The issue of bankability is even more difficult in adaptation project. We know that. And the third is that, so with the level of difficulties in bankability, what sort of adaptation project should be financed by what kind of institution? So if it's more bankable, maybe a country can get mobilized money from the local domestic private sector. If it requires some concessionality, maybe they come to Mdbs. If it's a very transformational project that requires only grant financing, maybe they should go to Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund, because that's what they set up for. So I think that is not very well understood in the countries. There's no capacity. So we have set up these facilities. The primary objective is, of course, to help them identify the right kind of investments. But I think even before you do that, certain upstream planning at a system level is required, because investments don't function in themselves. They function in a wider enabling environment with the right policy, right regulatory environment, right incentive mechanisms. So these kind of facilities helps countries to also identify those reforms needed, which then can be supported by our policy-based lending modality, etc. So I think it's essentially very, very critical. So what I really want to highlight is the importance of technical assistance is absolutely critical to help countries move towards this direction. Technical assistance that is long-term, that's programmatic, that's patient, and technical assistance largely that comes from, I'm not saying because Lena is over here, from financing partners like NDF, because we really need partners who understand where we want to get there, but not necessarily always telling how you go there, because things have to be agile. So partners like NDF really enables us to work much more flexibly by keeping the vision of the outcome in mind, but recognizing every country is different. So we have to work in the country systems. So for me, partners like NDF really, as an early mover, in trying to help us move towards the direction. So for us, it'd be great beneficial their support, and we moving forward in order for ADB to change our pipeline towards climate projects. I think this is the only way to go to support countries, build their systems through such facilities. Thanks.
Thank you, Orgo. There's something? This is my first COP. I know for you guys this is like the 20th. I find it amusing, this setting with everybody talk, but it gives a little bit of the sense of this is a conversation. We're having a conversation. This is not a panel, although this is being broadcasted and there may or may not be people here. I feel like we're having a conversation, so we'll continue the flow of the conversation. Lina, so you talked a little bit with messages that you passed on your first intervention about data, critical data as being important for all decision making, the lack of adaptation projects, pipelines, or projects, and you also referred to this, Orgo. Go a little bit broader now on the shedding a little bit of light on your mission. I don't know if anybody, I mean, all of us know what NDF does and how you do things and the things that you like, but what is new? I mean, what a little bit of on your mission that has changed, on the key initiatives you're supporting this year and you want to support, a little bit of the more strategic view.
Thanks very much, Matthias. And indeed, I mean, you all know NDF very well, and you know our strategy in and out, and you know our ways of working. But for the benefit of the audience and our listeners, I mean, we are the joint Nordic financing organization of the 5 Nordic countries. We focus our financing exclusively on climate and development. So everything we do is related to climate and development. And we have a strategy that stretches until end of 2025. It has a very, very strong focus on adaptation. It has a very strong focus on Africa, not neglecting other geographical areas either. That's why we work with Asia and Latin America as well. And theme-wise, it has a extremely strong focus on exactly what you brought up on the early stage involvement. And I mean, the NDC Accelerator is a great example of how we come on board very early. We started off with a booster grant. It's something, that can kick off things, start the conceptualization of the intervention, doing studies, getting sort of some support and some proof for the concept from other corners, from other financiers as well, so that we are building trust and momentum. So that we do a lot, and also the catalytic impact is very important for us. And initially I mentioned that it is with catalytic, I don't mean just mobilizing money. That of course comes along, but catalytic impact can be created as a combination of different things. I mean, it is the early stage involvement, and it is also the flexible financing instruments. And what I love most about it, it is the combination of the instruments. It can be, I mean, all of it is concessional when you look at NDF. It is loans, equity, and grants. We have a target in our strategy that 60% has to be going out as grants. So we are very serious about that. And grants can be extremely powerful. First of all, in the preparatory phases of different initiatives, that goes very far. And once you've sort of built the momentum and created the design, then other instruments can come on board. And lately, I would say that we've sort of strategically made a shift towards really this area of, the intersection between private and public. We've created quite a bit of intervention that focus precisely that. And there we typically see that grants can come in early when building the concept, and then once you scale up something, bring on board others, then you bring on equity and in some cases other instruments, but really the combination of that. And I was really so happy to see also the declaration of the Mdbs. I mean, we could have joined that. We are an Mdb. We're a tiny one, but we are an Mdb. So it's really spot on for us as well, and we look forward to walking the talk. And 25 is just around the corner. The strategy will come to its end, but we just discussed internally also that perhaps rather than embarking on a huge process of reinventing everything, we perhaps make some tweaks and continue, because it seems that it's really spot on and filling the gaps that are in the markets and in the climate finance landscape overall. Thank you.
2025, Belém. That'll be an interesting one, a very interesting one, especially for us with the connections that we have with Brazil. Helen, Lina was talking a little bit about how, what's the strategy behind it, and for NDF. This is a long question that I have here, but in the end, what it really wants to ask is, what I wanted to ask is, how do we, with all this, also many instruments that the bank has, and the combination with the NDC pipeline accelerator, how do we use this more strategically? Not only for NDF purposes, but for us. I mean, for the countries, for the stakeholders.
So I think that I completely agree that we have to do a combination of instruments. There's no one instrument that will get us there. And we do have to combine many, many instruments to be able to reach the goal of the trillions, but also a fast change of our way of developing, basically. This morning I heard somebody say, we need to make the changes that we went through in the Industrial Revolution at the speed of the digital revolution. So that means a lot of changes very, very fast. And so that's when you have to put all hands on deck to be able to resolve this. I think the interesting thing that we have is that we have the TA, the funds like the accelerator, but we also have blended finance funds within IDB group that basically are able to be used as a concessional funding or financing for our clients and our country member countries. But also we have an array of instruments like policy-based guarantees, PBLs as well, policy-based lending, guarantees per se, partial credit guarantees, mezzanine, equity. So we have to bring everything and try to see what's fit for purpose. So there is no one solution. We have to just see what kind of projects we have in front of us and how we best design that project to get to the outcomes. Because one of the things that I think it's important to recognize is that we need to also track impact. And we are doing that, right? Our president wants us to know that the resources that we're channeling for climate action will have the impact of emission reductions that we are intending to achieve and increase resiliency or reduce vulnerability of the region. And so I think all of us in the conversation we've had have focused on trying to develop an impact measurement, and that's the next phase. And even with NDF, right, with the accelerator, we're trying to check the box on how do we get the impact. And I think that if we have that data and if we have the KPIs and we have the indicators, we'll be able to use strategically the funds that we have.
Thank you, Helen. Davina, back to you. It's funny because the more I raise my voice, the more they raise their voice. We're in a competition. They're not going to win. So how does the African Development Bank effectively leverage, the hub, the NDC hub, to advance your own initiatives and contribute ultimately to the achievement of, Africa's development goals?
So like I mentioned, the hub is this platform that has information on what the other partners are doing. So what we do, what the bank leverages from that is to find ready government-supported programs or investments that are not mature to come to the bank. So what happens is those come to the hub, and then we match them with project preparatory grants or whatever facility that there is, in a way that they become attractive to our sector investment officers. And And besides that, because of that trust, because the hub has 21 member institutions, unlike the NDC partnership where countries sign on, this is where it's like the MDB working groups. This is where we do our Chatham House conversation as financiers on the continent to see who has done what in Botswana. Can we co-finance something without going through our boards and our senior management and all that? So that conversation happens at a technical level in a way that then we can take some trusted information to our sector investments. So there's a bit of speed. Case in point, when we had the circular economy facility, we have the first Africa circular economy facility, a dedicated facility for financing circular economy. How did it come by? The World Economic Forum is happening in Helsinki, and they want an African delegation. We had waste projects, but we didn't have anything circular economy. And what we did was ask around, and we actually find that there is an Africa Circular Economy Alliance of countries. We took that on board because of the different institutions that were involved. And it was very easy to get their stories, and have our partners, NDF and the government of Finland, take up the idea. Conceptualizing the financing of the facility took a bit of time. At what stage do we come into this? There's no financial structure for it. We're going to start it as a seed financing because we are hosting that secretariat. So there's a whole lot of conversation and structuring that come in when you have a platform from a trusted MDB. We're the only regional MDB. So there's a bit of trust when we host these kind of facilities or even platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Orgo, you're developing an adaptation investment planning initiative. As you develop this, and you guys are very creative, we have followed many paths, and I'm yet to get more information about the IFCAP, which I like a lot. Then I will tap into. I'll call you one of these days. So if you can tell us a little bit about the challenges you have for this particular initiative, and what's next for it.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we are developing this initiative because of the reason, just like take an example of a country. So Bangladesh has got a national adaptation plan, which says between now and 2050, every year they need $11 billion for adaptation. Of course, as the MDB is working there, we can't provide that financing. So the idea is, can we have a facility which, instead of only focusing internally on ADB, actually focuses on the country and help the country develop an investment plan for their adaptation, and that plan then becomes a basis for us to align our country programming and a pipeline, at least in climate-sensitive sectors like agriculture, water, urban. But if you do that, there are a couple of challenges. One is the investment needs are so large that it's important that adaptation investment plan is embedded in a country's own wider public financial management systems and public investment management processes, so that the projects coming out are not only for ADB, for a range of partners, including the domestic, partners. That's number one, the first challenge, to make sure it's embedded. The second challenge is to ensure, how do we bring the other partners on from the very beginning? So in Bangladesh, there's World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, there is IFC, there is AIIB, there is us. So we bring the partners together. We also have to bring the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, because there's no point in government developing their adaptation plan and then GCF, they have to again develop a separate project, because it just is a waste of time. So how can we bring all the partners together in this joint initiative of developing the plan? And the third challenge is, then how do we ensure, as development partners, we are able to commit, okay, if you have this investment plan in place, my next 3 country programming cycle, I will align 20% of my financing, annual financing, for this plan, which is important from a country's perspective, to have the predictability of financing from all development partners. These are big challenges we have to address. So we are starting this work, But also happy to share that under the Climate Investment Fund, where IDB, FDB, we all work together, we are developing a new climate resilience program where the whole approach is towards this direction. So for adaptation, really move beyond our individual pipelines, but help countries develop the right pipeline, and that becomes the basis for Mdbs to come and support. So hopefully we'll get there sometime, but currently it's a process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've been amazing in time management. Seriously, short, concise, concrete, and insightful. So thank you very much for that. Lina, one more question for you, and perhaps we have some time to squeeze a last few points. From the donor perspective, you talked a little bit about the use of instruments, and you have several. You personally, and this is a little bit off script with something you know very well, how all these instruments that you have work. But perhaps you can go a little bit more in detail. I want to know a little bit more how you select, different initiatives, a grant initiative versus a blending initiative. I mean, how do you do that process? I mean, how you internally sell an idea or prioritize more than anything.
Thanks, Matthias. A very deep question. There's no easy answer to that. I mean, as you can imagine, we get a lot of proposals because the financing is so concessional, so soft. So we get like hundreds of proposals on a weekly basis. But I mean, partner selection is one thing. We have made a deliberate choice to work with the multilateral institutions because we have a long track record. We know you. We rely on your systems. I mean, we are, compared to your size, we have midgets. We are all located in a distant Nordic country. We don't have country representation, so we rely on partners who have the resources. I mean, that's clearly one criterion. Plus, we want to contribute to the harmonization agenda. We don't want to create our own country programs and initiatives that would be solely funded by NDF. We want to join bigger initiatives where the benefits are global and benefit at a large scale. I mean, those are clearly very important cornerstones in our activities. And then we have developed internally a very robust selection procedure, which we call the identification phase. It has multiple criteria that we need to go through for each and every proposal that we get to our house to assess. And then we, of course, we measure it against our strategy. We look at the strategy compliance. How does it impact our key targets if we choose that ahead of something else? So I mean that's a very rigorous project initiative assessment. And our staff, they are learning, of course, the drill, but occasionally things happen that we have to drop things because a particular side of the initiative has not been assessed properly. But we try to be very thorough, and that's exactly why we want to engage early on with you, because it's fair also towards our co-financing partners that what flies and what doesn't, so that because if we are not co-funding something, maybe you will approach other donors to have the initiatives funded. But I think the main thing is that we have a dialogue like this. We know each other. We know what's in the strategy, and we know what kind of initiatives will fly. And I hope I have been able here today to really focus on the early stage, bring us on board early. If you have something that you think, this is going to develop to something, bring us on, let's see together. And then count on us also in the scale up phase, because we do want to see how things are then, when they start rolling. We are really keen on financing also the investment phase when we get so far. So yeah, we could talk at length, but maybe that's sort of
that's great,
the main thing.
Lina. And I asked you a question that I don't know I could respond. So thank you for trying and provide a comprehensive response. The only thing I'm gonna say is I don't think we're gonna have time to go to another round. But I wanted to close by thanking everybody. Thank you very much for your partnership. We were friends before. I think we're more friends now. You will see that the heads of Mdbs There's a proposal to do many more events. We used to have 2 a year. We're going to have a lot more. Our idea is to do 4 or 5 a year, including the ones in the G20 Brazil, the finance ministers. So to see each other more, to coordinate better, to dictate our own agenda. It's great to have the G20 also asking the MDBs and yourselves and everybody else what they think it should be to important for the stakeholders, for the countries themselves, for emerging markets. But it's also good to have own the agenda and move forward all together. We're going to be a much stronger voice. You mentioned a little bit about early stage financing, and we talk about instruments, very sophisticated instruments, and guarantees and blending and balance sheet optimization instruments. I think the early stage technical assistance, it's unbelievably important. And but we get in this fancy discussion about instruments, which I completely support, and the bank is doing a lot about, and all the MDBs are doing. But the old school technical assistance is key. So thank you very much, and thank you all the panelists. I hope to see you soon. Thank you.